Welcome to the Technical Report and Business Writing course. Today, we especially focus on how to write effectively in plain English. The main goal in writing is to put your point across clearly, concisely, and accurately. Many professional fields, including construction business, need to use plain language to make communications more understandable to their target audiences. By the end of this lecture, you will know 8 principles of effective writing and how to apply them to your writing. I'll also introduce you to readability statistics, an objective way to measure the readability of your document, and how to use these to set and reach readability targets for your document, depending on the needs of your audience. We'll start with an example. Spend a few minutes reading and analyzing these 2 samples of writing. They are 2 different versions of the same content. Which version would you prefer as a reader? Why do you prefer that version to the other one? What do you like it? What makes it better? According to the investigation, well over 95% of people say that they prefer this sample B. And that includes every level, from senior managers to newly recruited engineers. Why? What they say are things like, I only have to read it once to understand it. It's easy to see what it's about. It has headings and the text is broken up. It's less wordy, more concise, more logical, shorter paragraphs, to the point, and so on. On the other hand, this is what people say about this sample A. It's too long and wordy. I stopped concentration after the first sentence. I didn't want to read it. There's just too much text. I read it twice, but I still didn't understand it. It's boring, and so on. As we discussed in the previous slides, the version that people preferred was written in plain English. So here are 8 principles of plain English. You can apply these to any piece of writing to make it easier to read and understand. Firstly, use simpler, more familiar words. Words that all your intended readers will both understand and engage with. Secondly, keep paragraphs and sentences short. I'll give you some guidelines for that and give you some tips on how to do it. Thirdly, be complete but concise. Write what you have to say in as many words as you need, but no more. The first principle is to use concrete terms rather than abstract ones. The fifth principle is to break up the text. As we've seen, people generally don't like big blocks of unbroken text. Sixth is help the reader navigate. That is, make it easy for different readers to find the specific information that they are looking for, or follow the logical flow of your argument. The seventh principle is to use active verbs rather than passive ones where possible. Academic English teaches us to prefer passive sentences, but in business writing, active sentences are more often more direct, lively, and engaging. Finally, the eighth principle is to make sure it's accurate. We've already talked about the importance of accuracy in technical and business writing. The first principle is to try to use simple, familiar words rather than obscure, formal, or overly technical ones. In academic writing, we are often communicating with other technical specialists with a similar technical background to ours. but in a non-academic environment, especially when your readers include business types or the general public, unfamiliar words are more likely to cause confusion. In this example, words like maximum, detected, sufficient, and aggradation may not be that unusual in themselves, but strung together like this, they sound like the writer is showing off, using words to impress rather than express, and this comes at some cost to the reader. Where you have a choice, go for a simple word. Instead of detected, you could say found. Instead of at maximum, you could say at most. Instead of sufficient insulating effect, you could say enough of an insulating effect. Instead of permafrost aggradation occurred rapidly, you might say the permafrost built up quickly. The simple rule is to write to express your ideas clearly rather than try to impress readers with your wide vocabulary. Use words you would use if you were speaking to your reader rather than words we only ever use when we are writing. For the use of plain English, you can find useful and free resources at this address. The AZ of alternative words at this website for UK version. For a more American version, if you try this one at the plainlanguage.gov website, you can find useful plain words. The second principle is to keep paragraphs and sentences short. Let's start with paragraphs in next slides. Please read sample A and the revised sample A and compare each other. Sample A is a text with one long paragraph. On the other hand, in the revised sample A, the whole text breaks up into 3 short paragraphs. Which one do you prefer and why? This is because shorter paragraphs make the reading task easier. When you're writing printed documents, like reports and letters, try to keep paragraphs under 7 lines. For documents that are read online, such as emails or web copy, try keep them under 4 lines. This is because it is harder to read online than to read print, and it takes readers about 25% longer. And have one idea per paragraph. It's okay to have a paragraph that is just one sentence and to vary the paragraph lengths so that they don't all look identical. Now sentences. Many writers feel that in order to express complex ideas, they need to write long, complex, and compound sentences. This is not the case. In fact, the quickest and easiest way to improve the readability of your text is to have short sentences rather than long ones. Research has shown that most people, about 97%, can understand and remember a sentence of 7 words on first reading. For a sentence of 27 words, this percentage goes down to just 4%. A tiny minority of readers. So taking this example, for many readers, this will be a technical and unfamiliar subject, but it is also an enormous sentence of over 50 words. Now look at this version as a revised version. With a little rewording, we can break down the 50-word sentence into 3 sentences, all of them under 25 words. For printed business documents, aim for an average sentence length of 15 to 20 words. On the other hand, for technical writing and online documents, aim for a lower average sentence length of 10 to 15 words. Whatever the document, do vary the sentence length though. If every sentence is 15 words, it will sound like a poem and send people to sleep. However, try to make sure you stay under 27 words for any sentence, whatever the type of document. This is about 2 lines of text on A4. The third principle is to be complete but concise. Many people confuse being brief with being concise, but they are not the same. Being concise means telling the whole story using the fewest possible words. Being brief means keeping it short, but perhaps by leaving out something important. Having said that, good technical and business writing includes everything the reader needs to know about a subject, but not a word more. You don't need to include everything that you know or that can be said about a particular technology or methodology. Just what is relevant to the reader and the decision they need to make. Being concise is also about getting rid of any unnecessary repetition, wordy phrases, padding or rambling explanations that don't add any meaning to your writing. They dilute the important facts and messages as well as taking longer to read. Here are some examples. In this first one, the words visible and see are repeating the same idea twice. This is known as a tautology or redundancy. You have a less flabby sentence if you take out the visibly. In this example, we could improve the sentence and reduce unnecessary words by changing the noun, a reduction, to a verb, reduce. When we take a verb and change it into a noun, it is known as nominalization. Other examples are to make a measurement rather than to measure, or an analysis was performed on something rather than something was analyzed. Also look out for meaningless phrases like this one. If we take out, it should be noted that whatever is left can normally stand by itself. As a general rule, I try to cut down the word count of my first draft by 20%. I do that by just going through each sentence and cutting out redundancies, repetition, nominalization, and meaningless phrases as we did in the previous examples. The result is much clearer writing with more impact. The first principle is to use concrete terms rather than vague generalities, abstract terms, jargon, and abbreviations. For example, instead of saying the project was delayed by unfavorable weather conditions, we could say the project was delayed by 2 weeks because of heavy rain. Instead of saying that the new process is more efficient, we could more specifically say it saves $5,000 a day in materials, a 35% reduction in the annual wastage bill. Try to use words that the reader can picture rather than abstract terms. Often there are hierarchies of words that go from the specific to the more general and abstract. For example, we can refer to something as a house, a dwelling, a building, or a construction. A reader can picture a house in their mind, but a construction is too abstract to picture. It encompasses too many concepts, from a house to a bridge to a skyscraper to an oil rig. Another example is fuel. We could say diesel, oil, fuel, or source of energy. Each term expands the possibilities, but is less specific and can cause misunderstandings. Abstract terms can be useful to convey many ideas in a single statement, so they are common in academic writing, which tends to work with generalized concepts, but they are harder work for the reader to decode. Make it easier for them. If you mean a house, say a house. rather than a construction. Say diesel rather than energy source. A related idea is jargon. Again, jargon words can be a short and convenient way to label ideas and concepts. They can be better than long-winded explanations, as long as all your readers are familiar with them. But unnecessary jargon, like unfamiliar words, can sound like you are showing off, and that puts readers off. This includes technical industry terms that becomes buzzwords like dual capability, interface, and user-friendly. It also includes business jargon like blue sky thinking, cost-effective, and win-win. Also be careful when using abbreviations. Not only are they harder to read when there are a lot on the page, but they are also prone to misunderstandings. For example, FSA can stand for Financial Services Authority, but also Food Standards Agency, Fire and Security Association, Forest School Association, and so on. As a general rule, spell out abbreviations and acronyms the first time you use them in brackets. In reports and bids, spell them out the first time you use them within a section, as not everyone will read all the sections. Our fifth principle for more effective writing is to break up the text. Readability is as much about layout and how a document looks as the text itself. In order to skim or scan a piece of writing, the reader needs a lot of white space on the page. This gives the eye a chance to rest, and the reader can then take in more information in one go. You can see in this example, white space is created by having short paragraphs, but you can also break up the text with headings, subheadings, bulleted or numbered lists. You can also use appropriate illustrations like graphs, tables, pictures, and diagrams. Another option is to include text boxes, also known as call-out boxes, which you can use to highlight important quotes, facts, or definitions of technical terms. Think also about your use of margins. Some writers set their margins very narrow so that they can fit more words on a page, but this is not helpful for the reader. It is better to have wide margins. So use these elements to break up the text and try to avoid cramming too many words onto a page. It's also a good idea to mix up the design elements so you have a mix of paragraph spaces, headings, bulleted lists, and illustrations. This is because they attract the reader's attention. But if you have a page full of bullet points or illustrations, nothing stands out. So lose the impact. Aim for a balance of design elements and use them to give more weight to your key points. A related point is our sixth principle. Help the reader navigate your document. That is, make it easy for different readers to find the information they are looking for and to follow the flow of your logic. Obviously, headings, subheadings, and illustration help with this. Another tool is the table of contents. Use these at the beginning of longer documents like reports, training materials, procedures, proposals, and bids. Not only do they show readers where to find information, they also show the structure of the document, which gives context to your message. If the headings are informative, they can often summarize the story. For now, the important point is that readers may use the table of contents as a sort of map to the content. it helps them to put what they are reading into context, which makes it easier for them to observe and remember the detail. This is the opposite of a novel and some articles that draw readers in and build up to a big conclusion. In these types of documents, the destination is a mystery. But in reports, we can't guarantee that readers will read the whole document from start to finish. So the table of contents shows them the map and they can choose how to navigate it themselves. For readers with little time and competing priorities, this is much more helpful than a magical mystery tour. As well as headings, transition words and phrases are another way to help your reader navigate your document. Transitions are words like firstly, secondly, for example, therefore, however, in addition, also, in conclusion, and so on. Put these at the beginning of your paragraphs, followed by a comma to show the logical flow of your argument. This is a very powerful technique that really helps readers understand the structure of your document. I sometimes put in the transitions last as part of the polishing process. Our seventh principle of effective writing is to use active verbs rather than passive ones. In English, there are two ways we can write sentences like these. In the first example, a man wrote the report. There is a doer, a man in this case. He is doing the action, a verb which is wrote, and an object, in this case the report, which isn't doing anything. It's having something done to it. In the second version, we have swapped the doer and the object, the man and the report, so that now the report is in front of the verb. It is now the subject of the sentence, and the doer comes after it. This is called the passive sentence. We also changed the verb form. So in the passive sentence, we have a version of the verb to be. In this case, was, because we are talking about the past. And the past particle of the verb to write, which is written. Passive verbs always contain the verb to be and the past particle of the verb. So if we were talking about the future, we would say will be written or is going to be written. The verb to be tells you when it is happening. And finally, in the passive version, we add the verb by in front of the doer. When we talk, we tend to use active sentences more than passive ones. They are more direct, lively, and engaging. And this is true for business and technical writing as well. As a general rule, aim for a passive percentage of under 30% for general business writing and under 10% for purely technical writing. In some circumstances, this is useful if the doer is not known. For example, we can say a report was written instead of the active version. Somebody wrote the report. Or we can use the passive sentence. The house was robbed rather than awkward active version. Robbers robbed the house. Passive is also useful if the doer is not as important as the object. A report was written. Puts the emphasis formally on the report. We wrote. It is not relevant. Passive also allows us to avoid blaming. Rather than say you did not send the specifications, we can say the specification were not sent, which is useful when we are talking to a client, for example, or the boss. And passive can be used to avoid taking responsibility. Mistakes have been made rather than we have made mistakes. Academic writing tends to favor passive constructions to make it less personal. Experiments are carried out rather than we carried out experiments. The results are recorded rather than we recorded the results. And as we learned how to write at school and university, we are trained to write this way. The trouble is that in a work environment, too much passive can act against us. If we take the people out, it becomes less clear who is responsible for what, and when we want people to act, that is not helpful. Tests show that it is much more effective to say you must return the forms than the forms must be returned. And what makes you feel more confident? If I say the report will be written or I will write the report. So prefer active sentences unless there is a good reason not to. If you want to soften or obscure a message rather than be clear about it. We've already talked about the importance of accuracy, both editorially and factually, and we will return to the subject in the other part on drafting, reviewing, and polishing. I'll show you then a process for systematically editing and proofing your work. There is a way to measure readability in Word using readability statistics, but it is a hidden tool and you have to set it up manually. In your document, go to File and Word options. In there, you will find the Proofing tab. In there, about halfway down, you will find the Show Readability Statistics box. The default is that this box is unchecked, so you need to check the box. Also, while you are here, change the writing style option from grammar to grammar and style. This will help you identify some of the style principles we've talked about here, such as passive verbs. Then go back to the document and go to the Review tab. You can either check the whole document or just highlight the piece of text you want to check. Then click on the Spelling and Grammar button, or you can just click F7, which is the hotkey. Word will then take you through all the issues it has identified, both grammar and also now style issues like passive verbs. You have to choose to either change or ignore the suggestions. Note that for passive, Word doesn't usually give a suggestion. You have to work it out yourself. This is because Word isn't clever enough yet to guess who the doer is if it isn't identified in the sentence. After it's finished checking the document, Word will present this box, which you may not have seen before, readability statistics. The ones to look at are firstly, word count, whatever this is. If you tend to be wordy, aim to reduce it by about 20%. Then look at the words per sentence. This is the average. Remember, we said that for printed documents, this should be in the range of 15 to 20 words, lower for online and technical documents. The passive sentence shows your passive percentage. Remember, the range was less than 30% for business writing, less than 10% for technical documents. Here is the formula. You can also find it on Google. It takes into account the average sentence length and the proportion of multi-syllabic words. As such, it is a pretty simple tool, but it does seem to distinguish text that is easy or difficult to read. Note that it is only looking at language, not the difficulty of the subject matter. But what readability score should you be aiming for? Broadly speaking, a readability of over 80 is going to be very easy. a child could read it. This may be too simple for a business audience. Over 60 is good for emails, web content, and informal communications. Also, communications going to the general public, probably your widest audience. 40 to 60 is good for more formal business documents, such as some letters and reports, bids, proposals, and so on. To give you an idea, well-respected publications like The New Scientist and The Economist are pitched at around 45. Under 40 is difficult. Under 30, very confusing. Few lay readers would struggle through a document with such low readability, and it may be off-putting for specialists as well. So to improve the readability score, you need to shorten your sentences and your words. In this course, we looked at writing style, writing effectively in plain English, and readability. We went through 8 principles of plain English and how to apply them to your writing. These were, firstly, use simple or at least more familiar words rather than long, unfamiliar ones. Secondly, to keep paragraphs and sentences short. And I gave you some guidelines around these for different types of document. Thirdly, to be complete but concise. We looked at ways to cut unnecessary words from your text without losing essential facts or meaning. And we considered the difference between being concise, using as few words as necessary to get your message across, and being too brief. Firstly, we went through using concrete terms rather than abstract ones, so give more precision and clarity to your writing. And fifth, we looked at ways to break up the text with design elements like headings, lists, illustrations, text boxes, and margins to give more white space on the page. This allows readers to skim and scan the document more easily. The sixth principle we looked at was help the reader navigate the document using tools like a table of contents and transition words and phrases at the beginning of your paragraphs. Number 7 was to use active rather than passive verbs for livelier, more engaging sentences. And finally, I emphasized the importance of accuracy in terms of editorial like grammar, spelling, and punctuation, as well as the factual content itself. I introduced you to readability statistics, an objective way to measure the readability of your document, and how to use these to set and reach readability targets for your document, depending on the needs of your audience. Until next time, good luck with your writing.